What's up everybody, Superducks fan here for another car review. This is of course the 2004 Mazda RX-8. Huge thanks to Cullen for offering his mint, very clean RX-8 here to review for you guys today. So about the RX-8, well this is the first model here, 2004 for the States, and it looks spectacular in this blue color. And this one is so rare in the fact that it's stock and it's extremely low miles at less than 40,000 miles on this thing. And so really gives you a great example of what these were like back whenever they were new. And I think they look spectacular even to this day here. They still have some very cool looking headlights there. I love the fender bulges and just the, the shape of this car is just so different and unique. Of course you have the 4 doors that are nicely hidden, so it looks like a 2-door, but you got that nice suicide door that swings out there for the back. And the back end of this car also looks great. Very cool looking taillights, and just a really nice looking car that's attractive without being over the top, but it's certainly not boring looking, and I think they did a fantastic job on the styling of these. Right, for the interior of the RX-8, well, it's a very cool place to be. But anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats. Now, this is the sport model, not the Grand Touring with the leather and stuff, so this has the cloth seats. But they're really a cool shape, so they feel pretty comfortable here. You have some pretty good torso support up here. It's a little bit on the wide side, but, helps to accommodate all body types, and are still pretty sporty feeling seats. And then the thigh support down here is pretty good as well. The bolstering is a little bit on the wide side, but again, makes it comfortable while still feeling sporty. And one other little caveat though is there is a metal bar at the very bottom of the back support here, and some people in their seating position might not feel it. If you adjust the seat right, you usually don't, but it is there, and kind of a little bit of an uncomfortable thing possibly, for longer road trips and whatnot. But yeah, it should be pretty easy to get used to. Next is the steering wheel in the RX-8, which is a really great simple leather wrapped wheel that has a fantastic 9-3 grip. No 10-2 notches, but it's just a real nice leather wheel. Good size, and just is really nice to use. You have a few buttons on it here, and yeah, nothing crazy, but honestly I think it's a really nice wheel. Next is the gauges in the RX-8, which are really cool. I love, of course, the fact that this being the rotary engine revs up to 9,000 RPM, so you have this very exciting looking tachometer that goes all the way up to 10, and you have a digital speedometer there in the middle here, so very similar to stuff like you see in the BRZ now, and this was way ahead of the BRZ, and so it's kind of a very exciting and ahead of its time with that. And otherwise you just have your other basic auxiliary gauges there, but great to have that nice big tachometer. I love the font on the gauges, and overall they're just really exciting to look at. Coming over to the center of the dashboard, again, this is being the sport model, not the nicer trim. There isn't any navigation or anything like that, but that's okay. You have your basic little readout there for your radio. It has a CD player, and that's it. So there isn't any auxiliary jack here in these early ones, or anything like that, so you're stuck with either listening to the radio or a CD, and that's it. And you can't change this head unit out because of the way it's integrated in here, so you'd have to replace the HVAC controls and everything, which makes it pretty tricky. So that's what you're stuck with, but it works fine if you're happy with those two options there. All the buttons and stuff actually feel pretty good for stuff of this time period, and back in 2004 Mazda was actually praised for its interior qualities here, and I can see how back in 2004 this would be higher quality stuff. Now these days, of course, it pales in comparison to modern stuff and modern fit and finish here, but everything is pretty nice and tight. The plastic is a little cheap feeling, but again, for a car of this age and stuff, you definitely have to give it a pass. Shifter in the RX-8 is actually one of the shortest factory shifters I think I've ever seen in a car, and really nice feeling throws too. All the gears are pretty well defined here. Really nice and notchy feeling, and it feels great to use so far. As far as store space in the RX-8, pretty good. So you have a map pocket here in the door that is pretty deep, and so nice to have that. And coming over to the center here, you have a little ashtray and a power outlet there. So nothing generous there, but the real awesome part about the RX-8 here is whenever you go towards the back, so you have your 2 cup holders that are nicely hidden away by this armrest, which is not the softest out there, but it is nice to have some kind of armrest, but could use a little more padding for sure. It's definitely on the hard side. But anyway, you can slide that back, and then you can and lift it up and you'll find this little shallow storage area, but nice to have that there. You also will find a power outlet in there. And then since, you know, there's this is a 4-seat design, you have this console that goes all the way to the back seats, and back there you have 2 more cup holders and another center console area there to store some stuff. So overall, especially when you consider all that stuff, it's actually a really great car as far as storage space goes, especially for, you know, a coupe type body like this. Backseat space in the RX-8 is actually surprisingly usable. So I'm 5'9", and me sitting behind myself, I still have about an inch to spare as far as legroom goes. Enough headroom there as well. So great, you know, that it's good as far as that goes. It actually is a fully usable backseat that you could use every day for people, you know, that are I'd say less than 6 feet tall. And yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the only tricky thing is those doors, the way that they open up. You have to open up the driver's door first in order to get out of the passenger door there in the back, and so that can be a little tricky in tight spaces and things like that. But you know, overall, it's still just great to have that versatility. It's really cool. Trunk space in the RX-8 is pretty decent. You know, it's a little bit on the smaller side, you know, compared to other coupes of this segment, like a Civic Si or something like that. But you know, it's usable. You could fit probably 2 golf bags in there. You know, maybe a couple suitcases as long as they weren't super big. You do have a ski pass through there as well that, you know, adds a little bit of versatility there, although I don't believe the rear seats actually fold down. But you know, nice to have the versatility of the ski pass through, and still a pretty usable trunk that actually does have a nice amount of depth to it as well. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The RX-8 here has a basic key, and of course you have the keyless entry as well, but just slip it into the slot. And it starts up in rotary fashion after a little delay. All right, so setting off in the 2004 Mazda RX-8. So first thing you notice, clutch is actually pretty easy to use, but you know, you do want to give it a little bit more revs than normal, just because of the type of engine this is. And but yeah, just cruising down a park road here now. You know, you feel the bumps like you do in any other sporty vehicle, but I mean, it soaks them up pretty well, and it's a pretty smooth ride. Visibility is also very good. You have a hood that you can kind of see a little bit here, but it drops down nice enough that you know, you can see forward very well. View out of the sides is pretty good. You do have this B-pillar here though that's integrated into the door, and so that's kind of there, but you know, it's easy to look around, and of course it's nice to have the rear windows there so you can see around it a little bit better that way as well. View out of the back is great as well. You know, there's a nice rear window there, so overall pretty easy car to drive so far. Other things that you notice really early on in the RX-8 is the steering has a really, honestly, an ideal weight to it. It's pretty perfect, and the feel is really good as well, and it's just a great steering rack to use here. And the brakes as well have a little bit of travel to them, but they feel pretty good as well once you get into them. Alrighty, so let's turn onto this back road here and see how it does. Okay, we got the traction control to light up and everything. Woo! So it gets up and goes once you get it up in those higher RPM bands. It's just 9,000 RPM is always fun regardless of the car, whether it's something like a Shelby or something like this. Now, of course, the thrust here isn't quite as extreme, but it still is quick. So we're dealing with this 1.3 liter Wankel rotary engine that does about 232 horsepower, and then it has about 159 pound-feet of torque, which makes it a pretty impressive performer. 0 to 60 time on these is around 6 seconds, so nothing to scoff at. And let's give it another go, shall we? Oh yeah. Man, this thing flies in those upper RPM bands. It does not feel slow. I know some people have said RX-8s feel slow, and you know, maybe in the lower RPM bands, but once you ring it out, it is plenty fast to have fun, that's for sure. So, and it also helps that these cars are pretty lightweight. They only weigh around 3,000 pounds, so you know, it doesn't take a whole lot to get this thing up and going, and really fun performance in a straight line. And honestly, as far as the mid-range goes, you just have to kind of recalibrate your brain as to what is an acceptable cruising RPM, because you know, if you keep it around 4,000 RPMs, it has plenty of juice to just go, and so it makes it easy to dart in and out of traffic. You just have to, you know, keep in mind, you know, what RPMs you need to be at in order to do that. Cool sound to it. You know, some people compare it to something like a sewing machine or a blender or even a vacuum cleaner, but it's a cool sound. And as I go go around some corners here now. Don't have too much room here with traffic and whatnot, but it handles so well. It just drives so nice. Just even cruising around in traffic and stuff, it's just such a nice car to drive. And there's this inexplicable kind of quality about it that just like makes you want to keep driving it. And everything's tight and solid here, even though this car is now going on, basically 12 years old here. It doesn't rattle, doesn't creak, anything like that. Definitely could use a little more sound, but it's got a cool sound to it though. I really do like it. Another thing is the throttle response is pretty nice and sharp, and now it's not overly sharp, but it's definitely very precise feeling, and same thing goes for the clutch and the gearbox. They're all really great to use. All right, so going around some corners here now, try and get a feel for the body roll and whatnot, and it's so flat and sharp. You can tell it's really well balanced too. It just, and you leave that in the lower RPMs, or the lower gears and the higher RPMs here, and it just tears up a back road, and you get so much confidence in this car. It doesn't feel like it's gonna step out because there isn't really any torque, so you don't have to worry about that. And it just zips around. It's like a little, I don't know, like a little race car. It's nuts. It's so exciting to drive. I love driving this thing. It's so much fun. And usually, with stuff that's, 10 years or older, you kind of have to cut excuses for it sometimes and say, well, back then this was impressive, or back then this was acceptable, or whatever. But if this was still being manufactured today in the present with a slightly newer infotainment system, this would still be fantastic and would be a really nice competitor to the BRZ. Because honestly, I think this is right up there with the fun level of the BRZ. Not quite as tail happy, but the same great balance, the same great lightweight feeling. And honestly, this has a little more power, so it's a little more exciting in the straight lines. And again, just gotta wait a split second there, but once it gets cooking, it cooks. Man, this thing is fantastic. And I can understand why, these rotary engines can be a little bit temperamental and have some issues to them. They like to burn oil sometimes, and there's a lot of maintenance you do have to stay up to date on and stuff in order to keep this, in its peak operating range. But it's, once you learn all the quirks of this car, I can see why it's worth enduring all the quirks and all the funny things about it. Oh man, this is just one of those cars you don't want to stop driving. You want to find an excuse to go driving again. You want to find some other errand to run, or some other reason to run it up to 9,000 RPM, because it's just too much fun, and it's worth the poor fuel economy that these usually get as well. These usually don't get too good a fuel economy. If you get into the 20s, you're lucky, and I think that's okay though, because it's just a different type of fun, and a lot of other vehicles of this type, get better fuel economy, but they don't get a 9,000 RPM redline usually. And this is just, it's so great because it's rear-wheel drive. You could compare it to stuff like the Civic Si, but this has balance and a sportiness to it that the Civic Si has never had. And this just actually feels like an actual sports car, and it's tons of fun. Like I said, honestly, if this engine, it makes it, it's a Jekyll and Hyde thing. This engine is the best thing about this car and also the worst thing about this car. So it just depends on how you look at it. And like I said, if you're willing to endure the quirks and stuff, but oh man, this is fantastic. I don't know why Mazda quit building this thing. I know everyone wants tons of power these days, but the same people that love the BRZ and the FRS, you would love this car as well. And especially those that can't afford a BRZ or an FRS, this is an excellent alternative, an excellent cheaper alternative that, especially if you can find one in great shape like this one is, you really will have a gem on your hands. And as long as you keep up with all the maintenance and stuff, you're gonna have a really, really fun car for a really long time. And it's so much fun. It's just like, it's limitless almost, the way you can go around corners, and it doesn't even feel like it's breaking a sweat. I mean, it's engaging and exciting and fun, but it gives you so much confidence, and I wasn't expecting all that. And it's just so buttoned down, it's so precise, and does everything you ask of it. And you can't ask more of a car. I can't think of a single way that this could be improved. It's just, the handling is spectacular. And even whenever you're just cruising around town here, honestly, even if you do keep it in the lower RPMs, it has enough punch since it's so lightweight that, it's not that bad, honestly. And so I honestly, like I said, I can't find a single thing to complain about this car. I mean, it actually feels faster than it did, than I was expecting it to, honestly, because I did drive an automatic one a few years ago, just, you know, off camera and stuff, and I only drove it for a few minutes, but I was so underwhelmed with the automatic. Now, they do have 20 less horsepower for the automatic version, and the transmission shifts in such a manner that does not complement the engine at all. It actually has been shown to, I guess, cause some early failures in the engines as well because of the automatic. And so if you're going to do an RX-8, I think you have to do the manual. I don't think the automatic is even an option. I mean, it's still a fun car, I'm sure, you know, and it just doesn't feel as fast as the automatic because it isn't as fast, and it just doesn't complement this car's character at all. But this manual just feels great, and, you know, whenever you can work it properly here and, you know, don't have to worry about an automatic that shifts early and you keep it in the high RPMs, it is just a very rewarding car and just so much fun to drive. So once again, huge thanks to Cullen for offering his extremely mint 36,500 miles on this thing. I don't know if there's any lower mileage RX-8s in the country. It's really impressive, and so it's really great to see how these felt, you know, and I think they still really hold up well even with higher miles, but it's great to see what one feels like when it's still really fresh, and it's a really great car, and I highly recommend it to anyone that's considering it. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.